On a clear and cool October morning, drumming of pistons and thunder of exhaust reverberates from massive canyon walls as a heavy ore train makes its way eastbound to the mines near Cima de la Madre. Amargosa Badwater, number 116, is grinding up the grade through the nearby gorge to cross Benson Wash with 8 empty ore hoppers in tow to battle all railroads battle. Horsepower versus gravity. Welcome to Amargosa Badwater's narrow-gauge La Madre branch. We visited this hidden section of railroad a couple of times during 2024 to show you narrow-gauge railroad action deep in the Spring Mountains behind the cliffs of La Madre, just some miles from Las Vegas. Alpine and desert vegetation merges to a unique landscape the tracks had been laid through end of the 19th century to serve copper mines in this inaccessible area. Some of these old mines had been reopened not for copper but for rare earth mining during the beginning of the 21st century. The arid desert climate had preserved the old mining tracks well enough to restart operation on these ancient tracks. Regauging into standard gauge was as impossible for the mining company as building roads through this part of the Spring Mountains, so the old tracks were repaired, modernized, and incorporated as the Amargosa and Badwater Railroad Company, finally reaching the summit of the grade at Cima de la Madre. We find the Amargosa Badwater Railroad in the southern part of Nevada, west of Las Vegas in the Spring Mountains separating Death Valley from Mojave Desert. The ANB's eastern branch of the narrow gauge system around Death Valley is linking rare earth beneficiation facilities owned by MP Materials near Pahrump to the mining districts in the eastern Spring Mountains and a small intermodal terminal in the Mojave Desert near Las Vegas, served by the UP. We're traveling railroad west to east, starting at the east portal of the 3,250 feet long bore of Tunnel 1B at milepost 145, where the grade breaks through the bore to meet the first siding at Lost Creek, milepost 147. Climbing up the 2.2% grade toward Cima de la Madre, a switchback was replaced during the 1920s by 2 balloon tunnels to prevent from laborious switching every train to and from the La Madre mining district before we reach the next siding switchback at milepost 151. This is the busiest place on the road, and we will spend some extra time here. Passing a forested level grade on the High Line, the grade finally reaches Cima Yard and the ore tipple for the mines west of Cima de la Madre, linked to the loading facility by conveyor. So there's a lot to see. Let's get started now. In late spring, A&B number 101 emerges from Tunnel 1B pulling a local toward Lost Creek. A&B owns 7 of these rebuilt Whitcomb 4-axle 75-ton narrow-gauge diesels, handling most of the daily supply trains of the nearby mines. We watch our first heavy ore train as A&B 115 East pulls a string of modernized 3-bay hoppers out of Tunnel 1B, carefully documented by extraordinarily patient photographers along the grade. The close curve between Tunnel 1B and the siding of Lost Creek is passed with reduced speed. Former South African GE UM6B class, 91 number 13 has been re-gauged for the A&B WND was the first big diesel on this narrow gauge line. It still wears its old lettering as it pulls a heavy loaded string of covered hoppers out of the former avalanche shed that became an extension of the yard area at Switchback during the relocation. The diesel is rated to 750 horsepower and is equipped with a filtration system to be able to drive directly into the mine. ANB 1 of 5 arrives from Las Vegas with the older containers that are delivered to the warehouse at milepost 146, adding a commercial logistic point to this remote area. We watch the local backing into the spur. The locomotive will remain on the spur until loading and unloading is done, so end of work for the crew. At the end of the spur, we find a mine water storage tank. Contaminated mine water has been a problem since environmental regulations required a reasonable handling of pollution sources. The recently opened warehouse does not have too much traffic this morning, and a drop-bottom car is blocking access to the loading area. Later that day, we have set up at milepost 1, 45.5 as ANB 115 appears again with the second turn of the day, pulling empty 3-bay hoppers along the siding of Lost Creek. After passing the balloon tunnels, ANB 115 climbs up the 2.2% grade to switchback, passing the short bores of tunnels 2A and B. The machine is running in notch 8. The conveyor system connecting to the tipple above the canyon walls comes already into view. During late noon, we managed to hike to the top of Tunnel 2A to watch traffic between the downgrade from Switchback and the balloon tunnels and back to Lost Creek siding. A&B 102 pulls 7 container flat cars specially built for Amargosa and Badwater Railroad a couple of years ago, bound for the benefication facilities at Pahrump. Note the light blue 10-feet containers. These are owned by MP Materials and used for company-wide transportation, whereas the standard-sized ones belong to customers. From the same location, we watch A&B 117 entering the balloon tunnels with a string of empty covered hoppers before marching up the grade toward Switchback. It's already afternoon as we discover A&B 118 waiting for a clear shot down the grade at the east switch of Switchback, milepost 150. As the nearly 2,000-ton train leaves, the engineer throttles down immediately to go into dynamics. For mine water trains, A&B has purchased a series of narrow-gauge beer can tank cars to ship mine water for recycling to the benefication facility. We set up at the top of Tunnel 4, milepost 68.2. A as A and B 101 leads the mine support local back from SEMA downgrade into the bore. The inconsistent mile count is a result of the replacement of the lower switchback by the balloon tunnels once. The Whitcomb 70 tons have been modernized with dynamic brake to fulfill the requirements on this line. Note the helper spur to the right, a relic from steam days. From the rim of Lost Canyon, we watch A&B 117 West breaking out the bore of Tunnel 4. The engineer throttles up to notch 8 to make the upgrade to switchback with a heavy string of hoppers. Adjacent to track the small yard office, which is not used too often anymore these days, but kept in case a helper service is needed in the future. On a sunny afternoon, A&B 102 leads a container local from the Sima Mining District westbound into the hole at Lost Creek. Since UP is using 60 feet flat cars for containers as well, 30 feet containers were introduced on the La Madre branch and interchanged at the Las Vegas Intermodel facility. Apart from the radio antenna, the landscape does not seem to have changed much since the first track was laid here more than 100 years ago. Well, after sunset, A&B 117 East breaks through the bore of Tunnel 4 to enter Balloon Tunnel 5 to the left at milepost 62.2 before returning from Tunnel 3 eastbound up the grade to switchback. On another day, we set up again between Tunnel 4 and the balloon tunnels to watch A&B 115 departing Cima de la Madre. The train will leave via Sawmill Curve, cross Benson Wash and glide downgrade with a loaded ore train before turning westward through the bores of Tunnels 3, 4, and 5. On this exhausting vantage point in the canyon wall, A&B 104 shows us a special local on tow. The power supply of a mining facility is awaiting a new transformer delivered by rail, running through the Ballon tunnels toward east. Later the same day, A&B 106 emerges Tunnel 5 to head for Tunnel 3 with a container local in tow. Back at the grade above Lost Creek, we watch the big diesel carefully gliding downgrade with another mine water pipeline at milepost 1 48.5A. At the same location, A&B 104 is channeled through an old cut after leaving Tunnel 2B. A&B 118 is a reproduction of MLW's DL535 denominated DL535S because of some adaptations to the requirements of Amargosa and Badwater Railroad. A shorter frame and smaller trucks were needed due to tighter curves than the first DL535 MLW built for the White Pass and Yukon route. The locomotives are rated 1,000 horsepower and are in constant ore service. If we listen carefully, the paternity of Bombardier is audible every time these big, narrow-gauge diesels start to move due to contemporary traction motors and high-tech electronics. We watch A&B 118 East with an empty pipeline in tow. At the end of the grade, a yellow signalizes restricted speed to enter switchback. Note the antenna in the background. A&B does not use PTC, but the same radio communication components to prepare for unmanned operation in the future. By now, however, every cab still hosts a busy crew. A&B 108 East arrives at the west switch of switchback on the way to Cima de la Madre. Arriving at Control Point 53, we have made it to the west switch of switchback at milepost 150. Switchback uses two second-hand Santa Fe cantilevers purchased in era of pilot operation, and these relics have proved. The yard office is home of the local dispatcher controlling train movement in the Cima de la Madre area. The place the yard office is erected is an artificial platform on the supports of the old avalanche shed we visited earlier in this program. CP53 from air shows the siding to the left and the house track to the right, ending in two spurs on the east side. An old water tower is left from the days of steam when thirsty helpers were running up and down the switchback all day long. The empty pipeline we watched some minutes ago is waiting for an oncoming heavy ore train that has to go through the house track as the pipeline had to stop on Main. Dense traffic this afternoon. One spur track is currently used for parking of old cars. The roadside spur is used for unloading of commodities like grain, fertilizer, and the like. An B-106 races through switchback, pulling 3 containers over the west switch under the old Santa Fe signal bridge. The local will soon go into dynamics. The same afternoon, A&B 117 is seen again with a string of empties on its way to Cima de la Madre. Right behind A&B, 116 races through switchback for more rare earth ore. The line is busy this afternoon, so A&B 115 has to go into the hole with a string of covered 3-bay hoppers. These hoppers came from all over the nation and were restored and equipped with a cover to meet the environmental requirements for transporting rare earth ores. As A&B 117 appears with a loaded heavy westbound 115 is still on the move, ready to depart. To watch A&B 115, we set up at the east switch near control point 54 at milepost 152. The big diesel pulls the string out of the hole and into the final grade toward the mining district. A couple of minutes later, the grade is conquered and 115 races toward Cima de la Madre for more ore. ANB 116 West appears again with more loaded ore hoppers on the way to Pahram. The return of ANB 115 tells us about the efficiency of the loading process at the two-track tipple we will shop you later in this program. It has to take the siding this afternoon, waiting for the eastbound 116 on the way east. Close to sunset, 115 returns to switchback for another ore run. On a different day, we set up at milepost 52 again to wait for more ore traffic. We had occupied the old flat car to get a better perspective for the camera, so we waited. And waited. And did so again. In late afternoon, finally 115 was merciful enough to allow some more shots of the locomotive. On a different day, we watch 115 in the hole, meeting 117 eastbound departing with empties. From our vantage point, we have a nice overview for both east switches of switchback and the High Line, beginning at the obelisk marking the borderline of Clark County. Above switchback, we discover the counterpart, surprisingly lettered with State Line. It's a sunny summer day as A&B 118 leads the heavy loaded pipeline over High Line and Benson Wash into switchback, taking a siding. Red Rock Gorge once was a canyon naturally draining the area above. As track was laid here for the first time, the gorge was drained by an artificial wash the train is preparing to cross soon. 116 East is working hard upgrade with a string of empties in tow until reaching the High Line towards the mining district. At milepost 153, we have reached Benson Wash as A&B 117 West crosses the concrete construction that replaces a rotten trestle for a couple of years now. Sometime later, 118 East with the pipeline in tow is seen on the same bridge. And we're still not alone in the La Madre wilderness. In the distance, A&B 116 West leaves Cima de la Madre coming along within the next few minutes. As 116 leaves switchback in the background, 104 leads a special downgrade with the defective transformer in tow. Further upgrade we have set up at Control Point 65 called Red Rock Junction. Here, the recently constructed sawmill curve leaves the right-of-way to enter Cima Yard from east, preventing heavy trains from excessive switching. We watch 116 again east with a mine water tank car string heading downgrade. At the same location, we catch 115 East on the way into the mining district. As we reach Switchback Loop at milepost 156-115 is on its way eastbound again. Welcome to Cima de la Madre. .118 West is seen entering the mining district with a string of empty beer cans. The big diesel is working hard to pull the train around Sawmill Curve into Cima Yard along the fully restored depot in Spanish Mission style. Thanks to the friends of the ANB, the building has been saved and was not abandoned like others of this era, like the famous one in Rhyolite, Nevada. After arrival, the switches are lined, and 118 is pushing the entire train through Tunnel 6 adjacent to the mine opening into the mining district east of Cima. The old wigwam burner is the last remaining part of the sawmill that once produced timber for the area. After the mill was purchased by A&B, Sawmill Curve milepost 161 was constructed, and traffic at Cima de la Madre simplified considerably. From the same vantage point, we watch as 107 leads a local from Las Vegas into Cima de la Madre Yard, while 115 had started its journey back west to Pahrump. Joshua trees are about the biggest trees in this arid area. The building is base for all STEAM specials the friends are organizing during the summer month. Adjacent to the Depot A and B has recently opened a small service area for their diesels, supporting with fuel, water, lubrication, and a lot of sand for the steep grades around. The mine tipple is a double-track tipple for simultaneously loading of hoppers. The 3/4 mile distance to the mine shaft is covered with a conveyor system allowing operation day and night. Environmental aspects required a closed belt system all the way from the mine. From a hill opposite the yard, we watch A and B entering the second loading track. Soon after arrival, the loading process begins by pushing the cars back onto the tipple. Sawmill curve allows a loaded train to depart without the locomotive run around the train and using the turntable anymore. As the first 2 cars are loaded, the engineer pulls the next pair of hoppers under the tipple. A and B has finished the loading process and departs westbound along the depot and via sawmill curve back toward Spitzbach and bound for Parump beneficiation facilities. Cima de la Madre is the home of the Friends of the A and B operating the Cima Railroad Museum. It has a working turntable and a 6-stall roundhouse with an impressive collection of steam locomotives, some in operational condition leading steam specials up and down the grades. Back on the ground, we watch the former South African Class 91 number 13 pulling a loaded string of hoppers out of the mine. Since loaded inside the mine, these hoppers do not have sealed hatches but are covered with EcoFab plastic covers that can easily be removed for the loading process. Number 13 pulls the heavy train slowly along the museum. After arrival at the west signals of Sima Yard, the crew waits for a clear shot downgrade. End of work is close at the rare earth tipple at Sima Yard. Well, after dark, the last ore train leaves the tipple westbound, passing again the sparingly illuminated depot to travel through Sawmill Curve and downgrade to the siding of Switchback. As the train disappears, the silence of the night settles in this hidden area of the La Madre wilderness. I hope you have enjoyed our trip to this fascinating narrow gauge line that has survived as an important part of local infrastructure, not just for economic reason. All the best, and thanks for watching.